An independent review of policing has put together 56 recommendations to overhaul the service following a near collapse of public confidence following multiple revelations of misconduct in policing, including instances of misogyny, homophobia and racism. The review recommends that officers in England and Wales should earn a licence to practice every 5 years to make sure they maintain the highest standards. Well, Sir Michael Barber chaired the review and joins me now. Good morning, Michael.
Morning, Matt. How are you?
Oh, very good. Oh, very good. So, first of all, how much work did you do? How many police officers did you speak to? And what is it like inside the police force in 2022?
We've been on this review for about 3 years. We've had meetings with all the leaders of all the different agencies in the police and police officers themselves. I spent most of a week on the ground with police officers in Warwickshire, in West Midlands, in Gwent and in Cardiff. I talked to people doing road policing. I talked to people walking the beat in the centre of Cardiff. I talked to people in West Midlands dealing with serious and organised crime. Had meetings with lots of officers. So this is based very much on what we've heard from officers and indeed other people interested in reducing crime. And there is a loss of public confidence in policing. You can see it in the data, it's in the report. But there's also among police officers a loss of confidence. Austerity hit them very hard. They lost 20,000 police officers in total numbers over that time. That's now being put right by the government. But there's a lot of confidence to rebuild. And the licence to practice, the 5-year renewal, will help those hard-working, honest, committed, dedicated, professional police officers make sure that their colleagues who aren't those things don't keep getting promoted or staying in the police force. So we're putting that in as something that I think will build confidence among police officers as well as the public to change the culture.
And this is a bit like doctors medical people who have to renew their licence to practice to make sure they're up to date on the latest medical science training and so on.
Exactly, and it will help. It will make sure that because another recommendation that goes with this is improving police training, development, professional development, learning on the job. It will make that much more significant. And all the police officers I spoke to were very frustrated about the poor quality of police learning at the moment.
And how many officers do you think would fall foul of the license, having to renew their license to practice? How many? Because there's always been this debate each time whether it was Wayne Couzens who murdered Sarah Everard, or some of these other cases of taking, the terrible case of taking photos of the bodies of murder victims and so on. There's been this slight tendency to say, oh, it's a bad apple, or we'll root out. How many bad apples do you think there are? How many officers do you think would fall foul of this?
I couldn't put a number on it, but I think it will be a relatively small percentage. But the other thing is, and I've seen this happen in other professions, when you introduce these things, the people who, as they approach the 5-year renewal, think they won't pass, leave and do something else. So the actual numbers of failing isn't the measure. It's whether you're changing the nature of the profession, and that's what would happen if we do this. It's got to be done with rigour. And hard-working, professional, dedicated police officers will all come through with flying colours. They'll get better learning opportunities, and a small proportion will be eased out. Either they won't pass the licence to practice, or they'll go away and do something else before they hit that 5-year deadline.
Well, a lot of the focus and criticism recently has been on the Metropolitan Police in London. Have you come across examples of similar things happening elsewhere?
The Met Police has been in the public eye, but I think I don't think anybody would say it was just London. I think the policing culture needs to change, and the reason it needs to change, it needs to rebuild the confidence of police themselves. But we need to rebuild public confidence, because public confidence is the critical ingredient of policing by consent, which is a British tradition going back to 1829 when the Met Police was founded. We've understood that the police should have a good relationship with the community. So we need more people out on the beat. We need to strengthen our 43 local police officers. We need to rebuild that sense of policing by consent. Otherwise, we're going to get into a spiral that I don't think anybody in Britain would like to see.
I was going to say that you talk in the report about if action were not to be taken, we ignore these warning signs at our peril. What happens if we just carry on as we are and there aren't significant changes to the way that the country's policed?
The way the downward spiral would unfold is police officers or the police fail to prosecute crime, find the criminals, get charges, get cases into the criminal justice system, and guilty people found guilty. And that leads to a further loss of confidence, a loss of policing by consent, so less good relationships, so less evidence comes through to the police, so people don't trust the police. And you can see this in lots of countries in the world where the police officers aren't trusted. So we really need to maintain this very, very strong British tradition of policing by consent, which has stood us in very good stead over most of the last 200 years. And we need to rebuild it now. And that's why we're recommending not just a licence to practice, but a big new emphasis on prevention. If you take fraud, for every 1,000 cases of fraud, only one ends in a charge. The police can't deal with that because a lot of it's online. So it's not about bobbies on the beat. We have to prevent that. And so we're saying have a new agency that puts pressure on financial services industry, on the tech industry, to say, in designing your products, you have to design out crime before you even put them on the market. That's the way we're going to get on top of some of this. So it's a combination of things, making the police able to be more effective, but also around the police getting more strongly into prevention. And then finally, Matt, there's a big issue for police that worries them, which is they get sucked into doing a lot of things that actually you want the other social services to do. So the police spend 3 million person hours a year chasing up missing persons. They have to do that. If somebody's gone missing, they have to do it. But actually, the missing persons are often coming out of care homes. If the care homes were more effective, the police wouldn't have to do that. And 3 million person hours is enough to police, more than police the whole of North Yorkshire. So it's a big chunk of police time. Then there's dealing with mental health cases. We spell this out in the report. Lots of people with mental health challenges end up on the streets, and the police are the social service of last resort. They care about people. They like to be effective. So they sort those cases out, but that's distracting police from what the public think they should be doing, which is preventing crime and tracking down people who've committed crime.
I suspect the thread that runs through all of that, and you touched on it before, is austerity. Cuts have been made across all of those services, and if you are the last resort, then you're the last one that people come to.
Yes, so people fall through the cracks, as it were, and end up on the police. That's true, and austerity has had we've paid a price for that as a country, police in particular. The spending review announced last November actually addresses that. So increases in police and in social care and the NHS and schools. So you'd expect that to be turned around now. And we're saying don't just rely on the money. Make sure the professional culture changes through the licence to practice, through improved leadership development. We're saying more visible local policing, more bobbies on the beat in communities being seen and in dialogue with the public, rebuilding that policing by consent. Strong emphasis on prevention, and last but not least, strengthening the National Crime Agency, giving it a regional power to deal with the big challenges from criminal gangs doing drugs, money laundering, weapons trafficking, people trafficking, where we need to get right on top of that, and that needs a stronger National Crime Agency.
During the years of austerity, back in 2015, when Theresa May was Home Secretary, she said, she pointed out that crime had fallen in each of the years that cuts had been made, and so she told the Police Federation, so please, this crying wolf has to stop, she said. Does it turn out that the Police Federation and others who warned about cutting the police weren't crying wolf, and actually we're now seeing the impact of some of that?
Well, it's interesting that some what now known as traditional crimes like burglary and robbery did fall from the late 90s onwards quite steadily, and that actually reinforces the argument I'm making, because a lot of that was to do with policing and community policing, but it was also to do with car manufacturers changing the design of car doors, insurance companies changing their insurance policies, people at that time I lived in Hackney putting bars on your downstairs windows. People did lots of those preventative things, and that's one of the reasons why those crimes fell. And right now, we need a similar attitude to online fraud, which isn't about bobbies on the beat. We need the bobbies on the beat because they will deal with those traditional crimes, antisocial behaviour, the things people care about in communities, and they'll build public confidence that the police are around and doing their job.
But your point is the serious crimes need more than need more
Yes.
than that, and actually the best chance of dealing with them is stopping them happening in the first place.
Yes, but also yes for many of them. But and then the National Crime Agency, you do need FBI like a British capacity to tackle these big crime gangs who are not sufficiently under control. They're dealing with drug dealing, weapons dealing, people trafficking, and they're very modern. They're using the dark web, and our police force, our National Crime Agency, which is an effective institution, needs to be stronger and more powerful with regional outreach.
It's interesting now because over the years I've often heard about a British FBI. That was what the National Crime Agency was supposed to be. But it sounds to me like you think it's not doing everything it could be.
It's been a very good agency, and we see that and we say that in the report. But it's not got the resource and capacity to deal with it. Now that has to be addressed over this spending review period and probably the next one. But we're also saying it should control the regional. There's things called ROCUs, regional organised crime units, and they need to be part of the National Crime Agency. So we create a stronger national capacity to deal with that, and then we leave local police forces, the 43 local police forces, to deal with local crime, to deal with community policing, so they can focus on the things people care about. The police and crime commissioners that Theresa May brought in, we think are a good idea. Some of them are doing a fantastic job. They need to be focused on the crimes that people care about, that they elect them to deal with, and the National Crime Agency should deal with the serious and organised crime.
And what about the Metropolitan Police? Because currently looking for a new commissioner, there has been criticism that it's just too big. How can you be overseeing all the local police stations and the bobbies on the beat and all of that, while also being responsible for national counter-terrorism and so on? Do you think that structure needs to be looked at? Would it be better to have a London police force and then a separate organisation dealing with those national issues?
We haven't recommended that particularly, but I'm sure people will want to look at that. But the most important thing is to get the right person to succeed Cressida Dick, and then in each of the basic crime units to make sure there's very good top quality police officers overseeing, say, Islington or Hackney or Southwark, so that you get that level of policing done well as the centre of the Met. But I think it can be done. And on counter-terrorism, Britain does very well at that. You're always touching wood when you say these things, but our track record on dealing with counter-terrorism is remarkably effective. And so we're very cautious about recommending any change in that when you've got a service that is extremely important and doing very well.
And do you think that new head of the Met needs to come in with a pretty hard line, zero tolerance approach to whether it's messages, locker room banter, whatever you call it, which seems to be the slippery slope towards these terrible cases that we've heard about?
I think they need to be very vigorous in tackling the culture, exactly as you say, and that's why we've recommended a 5-year licence to practice that will give the Met Police Commissioner and other police chiefs the power to drive through change in a way that's effective, at the same time as improving police training and development, improving management and improving leadership development, so we get good people coming through. And we've got, with the 20,000 new officers that are coming into post as a result of the government policy, we've got a lot of young, talented people from all kinds of backgrounds, men and women. There's a pool there of future leaders of the police force, and we need to start developing them from the bottom up the moment they become sergeants, right the way through. So I think the culture can be trained, and yes, the Met Police Commissioner, the new one, will have to tackle that very visibly from day one.
And just finally, I mentioned you've got was it 56 recommendations in this report. How confident are you that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, will take them all up?
Well, I think what I do know is that she is very interested in our report. We've kept the Home Office informed. We're independent of government, but they've taken a lot of interest in it, and she's already put out statements welcoming the report. I wouldn't expect any government to implement all 56 recommendations, but I think they will take this very seriously, and I think a lot of what we're saying will be taken forward. Matt, there was a mayor of New York in the early 80s who his campaign slogan was, these are my 10 policies. If you agree with me on 8 of them, vote for me. If you agree on all 10, see a psychiatrist. I feel a bit the same about these 56. Look, we want a completely comprehensive renewal of the police force for the 21st century. We've set it out. I think the government will be very interested in a lot of what we're saying. I think we'll see some good progress, and the police chiefs around the country will take it seriously too.
I just want to finally ask you. I'll do. Let's do worse first, and then I'll ask you for the best of the example. What's been the worst things that you've come across when you've been looking at the police force?
I mean, obviously, the scandals that you mentioned earlier on, Wayne Couzens and so on, are absolutely shocking and horrible. The thing that I've come across personally, so actually talk with police officers, is the sense that they I went with 2 police officers to a call out where there was a violent young man in a housing estate being reported. They went there, they sorted it all out, and then they went away. But as they went away, they said, we know him, we'll be back here in a couple of days. Nobody's dealing with the basic underlying issue of that young man. And it's not as grotesque as the Wayne Couzens thing or the Charing Cross police station terrible messages, but it's kind of endemic failure to deal with the underlying problem, and that's what we need to turn around. We need to give the police the backing from other social services and from the new National Crime Prevention Agency that we're recommending, so that they feel that society's behind them in dealing with the problems that they're facing.
And the best. Let's end on a slightly more optimistic note.
Well, the police are very committed, very passionate, and the days I spent on the front line with police, I was very, very impressed by their degrees of professionalism. So while we around the country have been reading our newspapers about these terrible things that have happened in the police office, we need to remember that there are countless very, very high quality, very professional, very dedicated police officers who see their job as making life better for the rest of us and deal with things that the rest of us really don't want to have to deal with because they're horrible and difficult, and they do that with excellence.
It's Michael Barber. Thank you so much for joining us on Times Radio.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Right, and then